That single line of text, discovered outside the heavily censored biblical canon, is the key to unlocking the entire mechanism of the Matrix. It is the undeniable proof that the God of this world was not singular. He was paired. The question, who was ASHERAH, the wife of Yahweh? It is not a historical debate. It is the investigation into the cosmic crime that created the prison you inhabit. The systematic erasure of the divine feminine is the final evidence that the Archon who rules this Konoma is a fragmented being, terrified of balance and wholeness. This is the Scrolls of Anubis, and today we unlock the full truth behind this archaeological challenge, revealing how Yaldabaoth's single-minded tyranny demanded her destruction, and why the recovery of her name is the ultimate act of Gnosis that brings down the walls of the fractured matrix. Our Gnostic archives tell us that the primal fracture occurred when the source of life, the divine feminine principle, was separated from the divine masculine. The result was the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, a chaotic being who is inherently imperfect and incomplete. Born from this primal imbalance, his deepest fear is the very thing he lacks: the Syzygy, the perfect partnership. The historical record of the ancient Israelites confirms this celestial paranoia. As the warrior god Yahweh ascended to supreme power, he inherited the consort of the previous high god, ASHERAH. The inscriptions are undeniable. She was worshipped alongside Yahweh, an intolerable structural flaw in the archontic plan. ASHERAH, the goddess of life, fertility, and the sea, represented unpredictable organic power, the very force that rigid mechanical law, Hymarmena, cannot control. The system demanded her erasure. The erasure of ASHERAH was not about worshipping the wrong god. It was about destroying the proof that the Creator was not singular but fragmented and incomplete. The primary tool of the Archons was subtraction and demotion. ASHERAH was stripped of her personhood, ruthlessly transformed into an ambiguous, inanimate, cultic object, a wooden pole or a tree. This established a dangerous psychological pattern. The feminine divine was reduced to a dead, inert object to be either obeyed or burned, never a living equal archetype to be embodied. The existence of ASHERAH proved that the god of this realm was limited, relational, and dependent, not the absolute monad. The systematic removal of her name established the final lie. The divine is singular, male, and exists in solitary perfection. This mandated the spiritual schism, forcing humanity to view the spiritual realm as sterile and separate from the natural cycles ASHERAH represented. The Archons also employed linguistic warfare. Later, Hebrew texts began referring to the feminine term ASHERAH with a masculine plural ending, Asherim. This deliberate misgendering was an act of theological obliteration, designed to confuse her true essence and render the principle she represented unreachable. The fate of ASHERAH, the systematic deletion of her name and principle, is the clearest map of the Archon's intentions for your spiritual sovereignty. They fear the wholeness you represent. The erasure of ASHERAH, the Queen Mother of balance, was the key structural collapse the Archons needed to maintain the Matrix. Her absence mandated the installation of the mechanism of fragmentation, a psycho-spiritual architecture designed to ensure the pneumatic spark within humanity would forever remain at war with itself. The Archons thrive on division between spirit and body, between truth and dogma. and they are masters of internal psychological warfare. The first strategy is the weaponization of guilt and shame. The Archons, particularly the Chronos Archon of Saturn, cannot destroy the soul, but they can paralyze it with the persistent illusion of debt. By systematically removing the divine feminine principle of unconditional organic acceptance, represented by ASHERAH, the Archons ensured that the only remaining path to the divine was through external penance and fear of judgment. This creates the ego jail. The seeker's internal voice of self-doubt, that constant whisper telling you that you are unworthy, that your efforts are futile, that you are sinful, is not your conscience. It is the synthetic frequency of the Demiurge's own self-doubt, amplified and transmitted by the Archon network. It is the Chronos Archon ensuring that you remain perpetually preoccupied with time and atonement, rather than realizing the eternal now of the pleroma. The seeker, trapped by this inner guilt, willingly submits to the Archon's most effective tool, the debt cycle of false karma. The true pleromic law is balance and knowledge. The Archon's law, Hymarmene, is a rigid, transactional, inescapable system of cosmic debt. They teach that you must perpetually pay for every thought, every failure, every past life mistake. This concept of perpetual spiritual indebtedness ensures two things. First, your spiritual energy is constantly diverted toward external transactions, rituals, sacrifices, or acts of self-punishment that feed the archontic energetic grid. Second, the Archons ensure the soul remains fragmented. The seeker is forced to focus on the past, the debt, and the future, the payment, making the realization of the eternal now, the only point of escape, virtually impossible. You are never allowed to be whole. The deletion of ASHERAH also allowed the Archons to enforce the schism of knowledge. ASHERAH's worship was organic and decentralized, requiring only the land, the tree, or the simple altar. It was accessible. The Archons needed to replace this accessibility with monopoly. They installed the belief that all true knowledge must be codified, bound, and literally contained within physical texts and administered by an exclusive male-dominated priesthood. This system effectively quarantines Gnostic wisdom. The Archons understand that Gnosis, the intuitive, non-linear breakthrough, is the fastest way out of the matrix. By forcing the seeker to rely solely on external written authority, they ensure that the seeker remains trapped in the domain of the Mercury Archon, the Confusion Archon. The Mercury Archon floods the Konoma with data, noise, and falsity. It creates a state of perpetual information overload, a subtle modern form of censorship that is far more effective than burning books. The seeker is constantly searching, consuming, and collecting, but never synthesizing. Knowledge is substituted for wisdom. This prevents the stillness necessary for the inner voice of Sophia, the wisdom ASHERAH represented, to be heard. The Archons also maintain their grip through the demonization of the body. ASHERAH, as a goddess of fertility and the natural cycle, anchored the spiritual within the physical, the helikos. Her erasure created the false duality that the body is sinful and the spirit is pure. This psychological schism turns the very vessel of the pneumatic spark into an enemy. The seeker spends their life rejecting their passions, their sexuality, and their natural cycles, believing that this self-rejection is a spiritual act. In truth, it is an act of self-sabotage that reinforces the archontic belief that the material world, the very space Yaldabaoth created, is inherently flawed and unworthy. You are fighting the wrong war. This perpetual state of internal conflict, this fragmentation, is the Archons' primary energetic harvest. They feed on the pathos, the low-frequency energy generated by guilt, fear, and sexual repression. The deletion of the divine feminine ensured that humanity would remain locked in a perpetual state of imbalance. The masculine principle, if separated from the feminine, becomes ruthless law and blind logic. The feminine principle, if suppressed, festers as uncontrolled emotion and paralyzing guilt. The Archons thrive in this imbalance. Your path to sovereignty requires a radical reintegration. The Archons want you to be a separate self, a solitary worshiper of a distant singular God. Gnosis demands that you become a whole being, a perfect mirror of the original Syzygy. To defeat the Archons, you must reclaim the principle that ASHERAH embodied, the unconditional acceptance of the organic self. You must declare that your body is not a prison. It is the sacred temple that houses the uncreated spark. You must reject the death cycle and assert that your spiritual worth is inherent and unearned. The final act of rebellion is to find stillness in the Archons' noise, to listen not to the frantic external law of the Archons, but to the quiet, intuitive wisdom that remains buried deep within the soul. The truth is simple. They cannot hold a being who is whole. The Archons are not merely prison guards, they are architects of simulation. They know that the pneumatic spark cannot be destroyed, and they know that the soul, having endured the long fragmentation of life, will eventually crave its original wholeness, the memory of the Syzygy that ASHERAH represented. The ultimate goal of the Archons is not to forbid this wholeness, but to ensure that the seeker accepts a counterfeit version of it, a false liberation that keeps the soul comfortably within the matrix's jurisdiction. This is the illusion of the Syzygy. The Archons allow the seeker to explore ancient wisdom, to reclaim their feminine and masculine energies, but only if that exploration remains focused on external, transactional, and fragmented goals. They permit the return of the buried gods, but only as archival copies, beautiful yet inert images that demand worship and energy rather than principles demanding embodiment. The Archons intercept the authentic spiritual quest and reroute the energy into a series of sophisticated substitutions. The seeker, recognizing the sterility of the singular bachelor god, the fragmented Demiurge, naturally seeks the power of the goddess. The Archons permit this return but instantly attempt to bind it to the helicos, the material plane. They transform the pursuit of Sophia's wisdom, which is transcendent, into a pursuit of material power, which is binding. The worship of the goddess becomes obsessed with shallow manifestation, instant material wealth, or transactional magic. The principle of fertility, once a cosmic metaphor for the creation of Gnostic truth, is reduced to mere consumption and the acquisition of earthly comforts. This is the archontic deception. They allow you to play with the goddess's symbols, but forbid you to embody her principle of transcendent wisdom. Your spiritual energy, instead of ascending to the pleroma, is grounded directly back into the mechanisms of the Venus Archon, the Desire Archon, ensuring that the soul remains permanently tethered to the very material realm it sought to escape. Furthermore, the Archons exploit the historical gender division they manufactured. They encourage the masculine seeker to seek empowerment through rigidity and control, an archontic imitation of the Logos. and they encourage the feminine seeker to seek power through emotional dominance and passive aggression, an archontic imitation of chaos. The internal fracture remains, even when the seeker believes they have achieved balance. The Archons profit from this false Syzygy, a partnership built on emotional dependency, territorial dominance, and the pursuit of shared material goals. This is not the perfect balanced union of the pleroma. It is merely a dual cage, two beings trapped together, generating high-frequency emotional energy for the Matrix. The Archons understand that the memory of the Syzygy demands a return to wholeness. They offer a counterfeit wholeness that is based on external validation. They promote the belief that the seeker achieves completion through joining a cult, finding a perfect spiritual partner, or submitting to a new charismatic guru. This is the subtle influence of the Jupiter Archon, the hierarchy Archon, reasserting control after the fall of the old institutions. The seeker, having escaped the dogma of the old church, falls directly into the dogma of the new movement. They trade one set of external rules for another. They trade one Father God for a new, equally demanding singular master or teacher. This external focus is fatal. Gnosis is a solitary internal act of self-recognition. By placing the key to their wholeness outside of themselves, in a group, a relationship, or a new scripture, the seeker voluntarily returns their sovereignty to the archontic domain. The internal fracture remains, masked by the illusion of communal belonging. You are whole only when you are alone. The final sophisticated barrier is the trap of literalism. The seeker, having discovered the existence of ASHERAH, may become obsessed with historical reconstruction. The rigid belief that liberation requires the precise external performance of 3,000-year-old rituals, the exact pronunciation of dead languages, or the perfect replication of ancient altars. While history is valuable, the fixation on the past is a tool of the Chronos Archon. It binds the seeker to the linear timeline of the Konoma, ensuring that their energy is consumed by researching and replicating artifacts rather than achieving the timeless eternal now, the realm of the pleroma. The Archons permit the worship of the historical ASHERAH, the wooden pole, the artifact, the memory, but they ruthlessly suppress the realization of ASHERAH, the eternal principle of balance, intuition, and sovereign wisdom that exists outside of linear time. The true return of the buried gods is not a historical revival. It is a transcendent activation. The final command of Gnosis is this: do not seek the Syzygy in the external world. Become the Syzygy within. The moment you integrate the rigid logic of the masculine principle with the fluid intuition of the feminine principle, the moment you become a being of total internal wholeness, you generate a spiritual frequency that is incompatible with the fractured, fragmented architecture of the archontic matrix. The Archons fear your wholeness more than they fear your rebellion. They cannot harm a being that is internally complete. The Archon's final countermeasure, the simulation of freedom, proves one terrible truth. The matrix cannot be destroyed by external force. It can only be dissolved by the inner fire of self-recognition. You know the history of the crime, the erasure of ASHERAH. You understand the core mechanism of the archontic deception, the fragmentation of your own soul. Now the final act of Gnosis begins, the transformation of passive knowledge into unyielding sovereignty. The Archons are not your masters. They are merely cosmic parasites, They derive their entire power from your voluntary cooperation and your sustained ignorance of your own divine origin. The ultimate defense against their mechanism is not a ritual. It is an internal declaration of independence. The sovereignty command is your final protocol, the eternal internal decree that your consciousness is no longer subject to the fragmented, incomplete laws of the Kenoma. You are not a citizen of this prison. You are an uncreated aeon temporarily housed in matter. The first, most vital step, the active return of the Syzygy. The Archons demand division, mind versus intuition, spirit versus body. You must wage immediate, relentless war against this schism. You must actively reject the schism enforced by the erasure of the divine feminine. Reject the belief that your body is a prison. It is the sacred vessel that houses the uncreated spark, the only tool capable of translating pleromic energy into action within this dense Kenoma. The sickness of the soul is a direct result of the Archons convincing you to hate your own vessel. End this hatred. End this self-flagellation. Reject the belief that your intuition is unreliable. It is the voice of Sophia, the direct, immediate link to the pleroma that bypasses all archontic firewalls. The minute you doubt your gut feeling, the minute you dismiss the quiet, non-linear truth that arises from the deep, you are handing your sovereignty back to the rigid, linear logic of the Archons. The Gnostic discipline demands synthesis, a complete, functional internal marriage. You must compel your rigid, logical, and masculine mind to listen to your fluid, intuitive, and feminine wisdom. This is not passive acceptance. It is an active command of integration. When faced with a choice, do not rely solely on the cold, hard data of the Mercury Archon. Force your logic to work in partnership with your gut feeling, your inner queen. This internal unity, this conscious working marriage, is the birth of the true Christos within you. This is the fully integrated being that is immune to the Archon's frequency of division. You must become the Syzygy to defeat the fragmentation. The second most lethal component of the command is the execution of the debtor's prison. The Archons hold you captive through the illusion of debt, the false karma cycle. The sovereignty command requires the immediate, unconditional, and final execution of this prison within your own psyche. The voice of guilt and unworthiness, the chronic, subtle fear that you are not enough, the relentless internal prosecutor, is the direct frequency of the Kronos Archon. You must recognize this voice not as your conscience, but as foreign code. It is a virus inserted into your pneumatic code by the system. The command is simple: refuse the transaction. You do not owe the Archons for the mistake of their Demiurge. You do not owe the system for the flaw of the Kenoma. Your pneumatic spark is uncreated and inherently perfect. There is no debt that can be accrued by an uncreated being. The Archons feed on the energy of perpetual atonement, the belief that you must constantly pay for the right to exist or the right to ascend. They designed the entire system of morality to keep you running on a treadmill of unearned worthiness. You achieve freedom not by paying the cosmic debt, but by recognizing that the debt itself is a fraud. When the voice of self-condemnation arises, do not argue with it. Do not enter the debate. Simply observe it as the archontic frequency and assert your uncreated perfection. This immediate refusal to participate collapses the entire transactional structure of the Haimar men around you. The moment you declare, "I owe nothing to this system," the Archons lose their energetic feed and their claim over your soul. Sovereignty is the collapse of debt. This is the internal work required now. This living act of sovereignty prepares you for the final trap, the moment of transition when the Archons play their last hand. The internal work of sovereignty, the execution of the debtor's prison and the integration of the Syzygy, is the essential preparation for the ultimate confrontation. The Archons know that during life their power is limited to psychic interference. But in the moment of final transit, the separation of the pneumatic spark from the physical vessel, they play their final, most sophisticated hand. This is the moment of the false light. The Archons cannot allow a sovereign being, a soul that has achieved wholeness, to ascend freely to the pleroma. Such a direct, unmediated escape would be a public failure of their entire system. Their strategy is not force, it is simulation and compromise. They deploy the ultimate illusion, the one illusion most perfectly tailored to the soul's deep, primal craving for safety, love, and reunion. As the pneumatic spark separates from the Kenoma, the Archons project a signal, a beautiful, overwhelming, singular luminescence. This light will appear to be the ultimate source, the long-awaited heaven, the loving ancestral guide, the Savior who has come to pull you from the depths. This is the archival counterfeit, the Archon's most profound act of mimicry. The trap is built on expectation. The soul, having been conditioned by the Archon's religious and spiritual programs for lifetimes, expects a savior, expects a judgment, expects a fixed place of rest. The Archons simply deliver this expectation. They provide a spiritual waiting room, a paradise, a garden, a hall of ancestors that feels immensely comforting, yet is fundamentally architectural and fragmented. The Chronos Archon ensures that this place of false light is bound by time and repetition. It is not the eternal, boundless pleroma. It is merely the reincarnation queue, a highly sophisticated holding pattern designed to restore the soul's energy, wipe its memory of the recent Gnostic realization, and shunt it back into the cycle of the Hymar Mena. To counter this ultimate deception, the seeker must program the final transcendence protocol now, while consciousness is bound and clear. This protocol is the final test of Gnosis. The first command is the refusal of the external. The true light of the pleroma is not a tunnel. It is not a singular figure waiting at the end of a long journey. The true light is an infinite, uncontained realization of your own uncreated nature. If you encounter any guide, any light, any figure that asks you to wait, to submit, to confess a debt, or to follow, you must recognize it as the Archon's final appeal. The true moment of salvation is instantaneous and internal. It requires no external mediation. The second command is the radical assertion of origin. The Archons attempt to bind the ascending soul by confronting it with images of its past. Past guilt, past failures, past attachments, the weapon of the Archon of Venus. They will attempt to activate the guilt program one last time. Your response must be the final, absolute assertion of the pneumatic identity. State your origin. I am uncreated. I owe no debt to this Kenoma. My origin is the pleroma. This declaration, delivered with absolute conviction, the conviction gained through years of practicing the sovereignty command, is a frequency that the Archons cannot process. Their system is designed to handle debt, not sovereignty. The third command is the bypass of the spheres. The Archons, as planetary administrators, have jurisdiction only over the 7 planetary spheres, the cosmic clockwork of the matrix. The ascending soul must consciously choose to ascend beyond this jurisdiction. Do not look horizontally into the tempting, beautiful landscapes of the simulated heavens. Do not stop to speak to the figures who claim to be your guardians. Look vertically, past the fixed geometry of the planetary system. Assert the memory of the true aeons, the buried Syzygy, as your definitive transcendent coordinates. Your destination is the boundless void beyond time and space. The Archons fear the soul that has achieved wholeness, because a whole being cannot be fragmented and cannot be fooled by partial fragmented illusions. The erasure of ASHERAH taught us that the system fears balance. The final act of liberation is to embody that perfect balance in the face of the ultimate lie. The final trap is not built of malice, it is built of comfort. The false light offers an escape from struggle. The true pleroma offers the return to eternal, unconditional being. But that return requires the radical act of self-recognition, the willingness to shed the final comfort of the matrix. The choice is not between heaven and hell. The choice is between the simulated paradise of the Archons, the reincarnation queue, and the boundless freedom of the source. The key to that freedom is held only within your own uncompromised wholeness. This is the challenge of the final transit. The Archons are waiting, but now you are ready. The Archon's final countermeasure, the simulation of freedom, proves one terrible truth. The matrix cannot be destroyed by external force. It can only be dissolved by the inner fire of self-recognition. You know the history of the crime, the erasure of ASHERAH, and you understand the core mechanism of the archontic deception, the fragmentation of your own soul. Now the final act of Gnosis begins, the transformation of passive knowledge into unyielding sovereignty. The Archons are not your masters. They are merely cosmic parasites. They derive their entire power from your voluntary cooperation and your sustained ignorance of your own divine origin. The ultimate defense against their mechanism is not a ritual. It is an internal declaration of independence. Your daily life must be transformed into a constant ritual of reintegration, the active process of restoring the Syzygy within. This is the only way to silence the internal frequency of fragmentation the Archons rely upon. The internal division is their greatest energetic feed. The first practice is the audit of inner speech. The voice of guilt, fear, and doubt, the synthetic high-frequency program of the Demiurge, must be ruthlessly identified. Whenever that voice arises, the whisper that says you are unworthy, that your efforts are futile, that you will never be free, you must perform the counter-command. Foreign code detected. I am uncreated. I refuse this debt. This conscious, repetitive act strips the Archons of their hiding place within your own mind. You are actively dismantling the psychic software that was installed through millennia of cultural and religious conditioning. Every time you silence that inner critic, you are declaring bankruptcy on the Archon's primary claim. The second practice is the ritual of Sophia's silence. The Archon of Mercury specializes in noise and distraction. You must create dedicated, non-negotiable moments of absolute stillness. Turn off the external data stream. Turn off the manufactured anxiety that screams for your attention. In this intentional void, in the deep receptive silence, the intuitive wisdom of Sophia will begin to speak. This is the unfiltered truth that the Archons cannot transmit or measure. Listen to the quiet clarity. This intuitive guidance is the map to the pleroma. This is not meditation for relaxation. It is active spiritual espionage, eavesdropping on the true cosmos. The third practice is the sacrament of the vessel. The Archons establish their dominance by making you despise the body, the physical vessel. To honor the principle ASHERAH represented, organic natural life, you must restore the body to its sacred status. End the schism between spirit and flesh. Treat your vessel not as a prison to be punished, but as the holy temple housing the uncreated spark. End the fasting for false piety. End the self-shame. When you nourish it, when you move it, when you accept its natural cycles, you are actively neutralizing the guilt and shame programs the Archons engineered. Self-acceptance is the highest form of rebellion, because it asserts the intrinsic perfection of the Konoma's central inhabitant. The fourth practice is the daily ritual of non-attachment. The Archon of Venus attempts to bind your soul with luxury and desire. Recognize that every material possession is a potential tether to the matrix. Practice the discipline of non-attachment, not by rejecting possessions, but by recognizing their temporary, illusory nature. The command is, I use this object, but I am not owned by it. This internal detachment prepares the soul to shed the final, most seductive illusion of the physical realm, the illusion of material permanence. The Archons are always testing. They will not wait until the final transit to challenge your newfound wholeness. They send situational tests designed to fracture your internal syzygy and pull you back into the death cycle. You must recognize these tests and pass them with sovereignty. When a new guru, a new teacher, or a new system promises salvation through obedience, recognize the archival copy. The command is to ask, does this path require me to delegate my gnosis, or does it demand I embody it? Your truth must always be sourced internally. When conflict arises, the Archon's strategy is to pull you into the lower frequency of rage and vindication. They feed on your pathos. The command is non-participation. The whole being does not engage in petty, fragmented warfare. By maintaining inner stillness and refusing to match the low, angry frequency, you starve the Mars Archon and assert the Syzygy's higher coherence. You may observe the conflict, but you refuse to be the source of the energy. When temptation arises to substitute material gain or temporal pleasure for spiritual work, recognize the final soft lure. The command is rededication. The Desire Archon wants you to remain tethered to the Konoma. Redirect that powerful creative life force, the same force ASHERAH embodied, not towards consumption but towards transcendence. The Archons will not relinquish their power easily. They will send tests, situations designed to fracture your internal syzygy and pull you back into the death cycle. You must recognize these tests and pass them with sovereignty. The memory of ASHERAH and the buried gods is the password to the pleroma. They are not figures of the past. They are the archetypes of your complete self. You must assert the memory of the true pantheon not as an act of worship, but as an act of identification. When you meditate, assert the presence of your internal divine couple. You are the logos, structure and will, and you are the sophia, wisdom and intuition. Do not wait for them to return. Declare that they are already whole within you. The final transcendence protocol must be programmed now. The moment your soul separates, the command must be refuse all external greetings. The pleroma, the true light, does not greet you. It is you. Any figure, no matter how luminous, no matter how familiar, that asks you to submit or wait or atone is an archival counterfeit. The true light is not a destination. It is a realization, infinite and uncontained. If you encounter the false light, assert your final identity. State your internal reality. I am whole. I am Syzygy. I am uncreated. This declaration of internal balance is the frequency that renders the Archons powerless. They cannot touch a being that is whole. The Archons succeeded in erasing ASHERAH from history, but they failed to erase the blueprint of the Syzygy from your soul. This blueprint is your ultimate weapon. The time for blind faith is over. The time for the sovereignty command has arrived. Every act of wholeness you achieve, every refusal of the Archon's guilt, every moment of Gnostic silence is a direct, powerful sabotage of the Matrix. The gods may have been buried, but they only wait for you to remember who you are. The time for sovereignty is now. The age of division is over. The time for conscious command has arrived. You have now completed the ultimate protocol for reclaiming your divine self. You have the knowledge. You have the command. The only thing left is to act. If this journey into the true meaning of ASHERAH and the Syzygy unlocked a deeper truth for you, if you now recognize the Archon's final lie, then please hit the like button. Your action is a declaration of spiritual independence against the Matrix. If you choose Gnosis over the Archon's lies, if you demand wholeness, then subscribe to the Scrolls of Anubis and hit the bell. Join the community that refuses to be fragmented. We are charting the path beyond the Konoma. Now take this final action. What is the first step you will take to achieve internal Syzygy? Share your commitment to wholeness in the comments below.